Hi guys, welcome to our new tutorial. What we're going to talk about today is dynamic activation of physics chunks as shown as in a tutorial made by Alessandro Nardini, visual effects artist. He did the tutorial on Houdini and it came out on the group. Uh, Someone asked how to do it and the principle is really simple because what he does on the Houdini tutorial, uh, you can translate it really easily in Tyflow. Basically, what he does is he explains how there are main chunks that drift away and only the borders gets fractured and activated, as in they gets affected by gravity and whatnot. In this specific part of the tutorial, it also shows how he slices geometry. We can do that with tycarve, but for the purpose of the tutorial, we're going to do the same as it does. So we're going to use Voronoi chunks and then fracture them again and measure distance between the small chunks belonging to the big chunks. And as soon as this distance uh, reaches a certain threshold, activate them and make them fall. So this is the theory behind his tutorial. Yeah, we can see here the pre-cut geometry. You can do that in 3ds Max using multiple scripts, but there is a Tyflow modifier named tycarve. But this will slow down the tutorial, so we're gonna use it. The principle is absolutely the same. We'll just use Voronoi chunks. So let's start. I prepared three geometries: a simple box, a meteorite, and a brick. I created the brick and the meteorite using Debris Maker, which is a free script. It's amazing. Check it out. Just Google it. And we're gonna use the box for start because it's the most simple. I created a particle using the birth object, and then we Voronoi it. We're gonna keep keep it simple for start. So we're gonna use less points. 2 is the minimum, so the object is split in two. And what we want is make the big chunks drift away, and just the small chunks close to the border get activated as soon as the distance uh, gets over a certain threshold. So let's see the pivot, the transformation matrix axis of the main chunks. We're going to use the display operator, which is amazing. As we can see, the pivots, they're aligned to the word. Uh, just to We could move them in many ways. We could even animate them by hand, but to keep things procedural, we're going to do this um, in a procedural way. So we're going to change the pivots so they're aligned to an object. As we can see, if you want to rotate only the pivots, you disable, sorry, look at, not object align. You disable the affect particle shape orientation, or you're gonna have the whole shape rotate. We just want the pivots to rotate. Um, Let me, yeah, you can see that disabling affect particle shape orientation just rotates the pivot. So let me, we can change the forward vector to another axis. Yeah, if we change it to that, we have the y axis towards the center, but we're gonna keep it on auto. It's okay already. So yeah, oh sorry, the timing must be set on event entry, so it affects the pivot only when on the first step of our animation, and we can see it works uh, even if we change the number of points in a procedural way, and we can add a speed and set it to the particle axis. So negative speed. Yes, sort of what I want. Um, oh, let's try something. Uh, let's create a dummy and align it to the center of the box. And make the particles look for the dummy, because I didn't knew um, what was the box center, but we know for sure that the dummy center. Oh, so we can see they drift away from the dummy. We can see that the people. Yeah, now we can see that the Z axis is pointing to the dummy. So all the pivots are aligned towards the center, and we can now adjust the speed so they move along the z-axis, and now we can see that I'm obtaining what I want, so they're drifting away from like from a center. We could have done this in many ways. This is just one of them. It's nice because it shows also something not known about the rotation, so you can rotate the pivot only and not the whole particle. Let's send them out with a time test and see what happens. So test value of 10 with a variation of 9 means either one frame or yeah, let's lower this a bit. So 4 is 5 frames, could be frame 1 or frame 9. Even lower maybe. Yeah, so they get all almost at the same time to the event that is sending them drifting away. But the speed is really high. We could set it to a low value from start, but this wouldn't give the effect I want. This is really low, sorry. Yeah, maybe .1. See, now they go away, but they slowly go away. What I want is starting high speed that gets slowed down immediately. So it gives like an idea of shock between the main chunks, and then it goes with a constant velocity. So we're gonna keep the high speed at the beginning and then slow them down. Uh, let's see what happens. Yeah, they get to a halt almost immediately, and that's not what we want. So let's filter. If you see my tutorial about filters, you know what I'm doing here. Let's filter by velocity magnitude. So the slow operator will operate until the velocity magnitude is above a certain threshold. Let's say greater than 0.2. So it's gonna stop slowing the particles as soon as their velocity magnitude is below this value, and this should make them drift away. There it is. Nice. So they have an initial speed of -5. It gets slowed down by this operator until they reach the velocity magnitude of 0.2. So now let's create the smaller chunks. We're gonna spawn the original chunks, and we're gonna use a set target. When you spawn the particles, you can make them remember their parent. So as you can see here, remember parent. So they're gonna remember the main chunk they're generated from, and then we're gonna set the target based on parent. So there is a relationship with the main with the parent, and we're gonna link them to the parent. So this should make the spawn chunks follow the main chunks. Uh, they're gonna follow not because there is a force, but because they're linked to the target, and this makes it easy to obtain the next step. So we're gonna fracture. We're gonna have our small fractures, and they are gonna follow the sorry. Well, we should follow. We should Voronoi fracture after we set the parent, and as we can see, they're gonna follow the main chunk. This is not due by force. Again, this is due to the linked target operator. So they're linked. So now what we can do is measure the distance between the small chunks, and only for the ones close to the border. And we're gonna check if this distance goes above a certain threshold. And when it does, we're gonna activate them. So let's add a physics shape. Nothing happens here because the particles are still linked. So we want to let's see. Let's switch them to kinematic. And now let's send them on another event based on time. And in this other event, we're gonna activate them. So physics switch to dynamic, but they're still not gonna fall because they're still linked. But if we manually unlink them, there it is. Now the as you can see, they get affected by the default Tyflow physics gravity, and as we can see, there is also the ground plane. So this is the main setup. What we want right now is to activate only the chunks close to the border and activate them only if the main chunk drift away enough. So how can we measure the distance? We're going to use a physics binding set to tether. Let's hide the pivots. Okay. Let's raise the distance. Oh, sorry. We have to. Yeah, distance tether is okay. So they're not glued. It's just gonna be a stretchable binding. Sorry. Yeah. Now if we put that above kinematic, we can see the bindings now. What we want is not bind all the chunks together, but bind only the ones belonging to different main parent chunks. So not bind the ones belonging to the same chunk, just the ones belonging to different chunks. And we can obtain this easily by identifying the main chunks. We're gonna do this with custom property operator. And what we're going to use is the birth ID. We can write a custom float with the birth ID. Let's name it my birth ID. And we can see it in the viewport. Let's hide the yeah, okay, so let's hide the pivots. We can see the birth ID. So this is the custom float where we wrote the birth ID of the particle. Is a different number for each chunk. And the nice thing about the spawn operator is that this tag that we added to the particle, it gets inherited by the spawn particles. So if we paste the display data operator, and let's hide the transformation matrix axis, we can see that each chunk remembers its origins. And we can use this information to make the bindings be generated only between the chunks and not inside the same chunks. This is really easy because there is a clustering option, and we're going to cluster by birth ID and cluster only if they're different. And now we can see this kind of stitches between the chunks. Yeah, this is similar to what Alessandro shows in its original tutorial. Let's lower the distance. So only the ones close to the border gets bound. And then we're gonna check if the distance gets enough to activate the chunks. So we can break um, the bindings based on the stretching. And so as soon as the binding is broken, we can send the small chunk to our activation operator. Let's try with 5% or 10% maybe. Yeah, you decide in your animation what's the right value. Um, it's not gonna work with force or torque because those chunks they're not affected by forces. They are linked to the original chunk, so torque or force are not gonna work. But the stretching is measurable, and as we can see, it breaks with a stretch percent of 10 plus 10%. Yeah, let's yeah, everything should be set. Let's try to raise the number of Voronoi fractures, like 1000. It's really fast, as you can see, and we can visually see the borders. Only them are stitched, so only them will get activated as soon as we test for the broken binding. Uh, yeah, I think that they break nicely, maybe even less, so they're gonna break earlier. Let me disable real time. Yeah, I kind of like it. Okay, so let's get rid of the time test, and let's use a property test instead. So we're gonna check for physx bind broken, and if we have more than one binding broken, let's send them to the activating event. So yeah, we have like 3 bindings per particle, so if at least one gets broken, activate them. And it's working already, as you can see. The chaos we're seeing is because the binding is still there. So it's like an elastic that makes the small chunk go a bit crazy. What we can do is get rid of the binding using the physx break. We can choose if we want to get rid of all as soon as the small chunk gets in the event, or delete them randomly per step or per particle. So right now, as soon as they get in the event, every binding gets deleted. If we want to keep the chaos, we can slowly delete the bindings, like one every 10 frames, for example. Might be a bit too slow. No, it's fast enough. Let's see. I really like how this works already in just with a bunch of operators in a few minutes, like 3 minutes, and the basics of the simulation is done. Um, it works nicely. Yeah. I keep. I would. Um, yeah, for the purpose of the tutorial, I would avoid the random breaking, because this is something you can fine tune in your final animation. Yeah, see how they hang here, like if yeah, their binding is working here, so it makes them go a bit crazy before getting broken and letting the chunk go. But you can fine tune that in your final animation. This could work, for example, if you had uh, like internal fibers holding up the chunks, like if it was concrete with I don't know, metal inside. But for the purpose of the tutorial, let's break them all. So they're gonna just behave as rocks on the edges of the main drifting chunks. Nice. And this is procedural, by the way, which means that if we change the original object with the ones I created with the debris generator, this should work. We should be able to make it work changing very few parameters. Let's try with the brick first. Oh, we can see the stitches already. Um, yeah, let's try to play the animation and see if it works. no need to change parameters. It's working already, which is amazing. I mean, you could have smaller chunks and less distance. So, uh, but the main uh, setup works already. Just changing the main the starting geometry, and so it's completely procedural. Again, we can already see the stitches. Yeah, that's the power of Tyflow. One quick setup done in a few minutes, and you change the original geometry, and you have a great starting point for your final shot. Once you're happy, you can pre-cut your geometry using tycarb or whatever method you want. You could use the 3ds Max booleans or whatever method you want, and you could animate the chunks by hand. Um, but the main thing about the small chunks getting activated as soon as the big chunks get far away, it's already in there. You just change the sides of the chunks, the details of the chunks. You could spawn the moving ones and add details after with the displacement operator, for example, and link them to the moving ones. But we're talking about production. This the goal of this tutorial is reached. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, bye.